But yesterday we talked about the potential of a JT Realmuto return in free agency this offseason. But what's the Phillies' plan if they don't re-sign JT or if he signs elsewhere for maybe more years or more money? Let's talk about it next right here on the PHLY Phillies podcast. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the PHLY Phillies podcast. Tyler Zulli here. And today I thought we would take a look at the future of the Phillies if there is no JT in that future. And we'll take a look at three players, three trades specifically, that the Phillies could make if JT is not the catcher for the Phillies in 2026. Now, yesterday we talked about the free agent list of catchers, and let's be honest, it's not particularly good. Outside of Victor Caratini and the odd chance of one of two guys between Contreras or Perez not having their club options picked up, the free agent list is not good, and it doesn't really involve a whole lot of starting caliber catchers, which is exactly what the Phillies would need. So if the Phillies decide it's not JT, or if JT decides it's not the Phillies, what does the future of the backstop position look like for the Phillies over the next couple of seasons? Well, that's where the trade market would have to come into play. So we come up with three different names, one high-end, one middle, and one maybe lower-end player that I think the Phillies could potentially target. Now, the high-end player isn't obvious. You've seen it written all over the place. You've seen the conversations take place a ton. And I'm going to preface this by saying I don't think that this happens. I don't think the Baltimore Orioles trade Adley Rutschman. But let's take a look at Rutschman's numbers from a season ago, and we'll talk about what has happened with Rutschman since being anointed the next big thing. So here's Adley Rutschman's numbers from a season ago, and there's no question about it. It's been a weird couple of years for Rutschman. Now, injury-plagued season last year, but now for Rutschman over the last two seasons, it has been a step in the wrong direction. Just 90 games played last year, a 220 average, the slug, not good, 366. Down into single-digit home runs, just 29 RBI, 27 extra bases, the OPS plus below average, the WRC plus below average at 90 and 91 respectively. Now, the thing that Rutschman does well, we know he doesn't swing and miss a lot, he doesn't chase a lot, he doesn't strike out a lot, and he does walk at a pretty good rate, especially for a catcher. But it's been a weird two seasons because he's doing a lot of the same things, right? His hard hit percentages are right around the same as his career average. His solid contact last year was tied for a career high. His barrel rates are pretty much right there. And we've talked about the chase rates, right? They're pretty much exactly where they've been throughout the majority of his career. He walks at a good rate. He's pretty much doing everything that you could ask him, or did everything that you could ask from him from a metric standpoint. But the numbers have not been there. His average has dipped each of the last 2 years from 277 to 250 to last year at 220. The on-base percentage has gone in the wrong direction. The slugging is down nearly 90 points. The OPS down over 120 points. And the power just simply hasn't been there. 20 home runs in 23, 19 and 24. Down to just 9 and 25. Now, the at-bat numbers, of course, have been significantly less. He had 571 at-bats in 2024, just 322 in 2025. This is an interesting conversation because I think the first part is, do the Orioles want to give up on Adley Rutschman? Now, everybody knows that Samuel Basallo got signed to the big long-term extension. He's a guy that the Orioles really, really like. And he's a guy that I really, really like. I think right now Samuel Basallo has a long offensive career ahead of him. The question is he an everyday catcher? So you put those two things together, and it's a question of, do the Orioles want to move on from Adley Rutschman? Mike Elias has made it pretty clear that they don't envision a trade for Rutschman this season. And with that being paired with the fact that we ask, is Samuel Basallo an everyday catcher? I know he's an everyday hitter, meaning he'll catch some, he'll DH some. I know the bat is going to be great. I know that for a fact. I am so sold on Samuel Basallo as a hitter. I think that is a foregone conclusion. Is he an everyday catcher? And if he's not, well, you need somebody to catch the other half of the games or third of the games or whatever it might be. I don't know if Basallo is a 130-plus game catcher now or in the future. I know that Rutschman could be that tandem guy with him. And I think right now it looks like the Orioles are planning on playing Rutschman some at catcher, playing Basallo some at catcher, having the other guy DH on the days that the other one is catching, and splitting the catching duties between the two keeps everybody fresh, and it allows both of those two guys to kind of flourish in a tandem role, getting Rutschman back healthy and seeing how many games Basallo can take as the everyday catcher. So the second question is, are the Orioles just going to move on from him? and what do they want in exchange? I still think even after an injury-plagued year and now thinking about basically a season and a half of not having productivity from Rutschman, I do still think the Orioles would want a ton in exchange for the former number one overall pick. So I don't necessarily think, the Orioles are going to want to move him, and even if they do, if the Phillies are in line to acquire that type of player with the return that I expect it to be. So let's get to the next player. And that's a guy who I'm not sure he's a catcher anymore. And that's where we're kind of at with this conversation. When you think about the productive catchers in Major League Baseball, guys that are both good defensively and offensively. We talked about it yesterday. There aren't many of them that can do both. JT is one of the few guys, even with diminishing returns offensively, that can do both. I know the next guy on the list can hit, but can he be an everyday catcher? The Cardinals put him through a throwing program because he was not throwing out any runners. Every single base runner that tried to steal second base last year against this guy was safe. So they put him through a throwing program. They stepped him out from behind the plate. They made him play a lot of DH. He played some outfield even. And the question was, is this guy an everyday catcher, or is he a catcher, period? Well, the Cardinals have said that they are thinking about moving him back to the catching position, which is interesting because he's not been a good defender throughout his time. And I do wonder, is he even an everyday catcher at this point? But the one thing I know that he can do is hit. And that's Ivan Herrera from the St. Louis Cardinals. So let's take a look at Herrera's numbers from a season ago, which were primarily due in part as a DH. But the offensive numbers are there. 284 average, a 464 slug, an 837 OPS. Almost 20 home runs, 66 RBI, 32 extra base hits. The OPS plus and the WRC plus are both well above average, and you see his Baseball Savant page there. There's a lot of red. He doesn't strike out a lot. He walks it a good bit. The expected numbers are actually even better than what his real numbers were. I can tell you right now, much like with the Samuel Basallo conversation, with certainty that Ivan Herrera is a good hitter. I know that for a fact. But the questions for him are, A, is he an everyday catcher at this point? And B, do the Cardinals want to move him? Because they have 5 catchers that are probably going to be on their 40. After they add their big prospect Leonardo Bernal to their 40, that puts them up to potentially 5 catchers on their 40-man roster. They also have to think about, in the coming years, what are they going to do with their number 3 prospect and the number 6 catching prospect in all of baseball, Raynel Rodriguez. Now, he's a few years away still from having to be added to the 40, but he's going to be in their future plans. So are the Cardinals going to move a catcher this offseason? I think that they probably are. The question is it A, going to be Herrera, who they seemingly like at DH, but have also said that they are trying to get him back behind the plate, or is it going to be one of the other catchers, like, for example, a Pedro Pajes, who I think probably has significantly less trade value, but caught in the major leagues this past year? How about Joel Pozo, who also has major league experience over the last couple of seasons? I don't know what his interest is going to be in a trade market, but I think that the Cardinals have a lot of catchers on their 40 and are going to add another one in the coming days and have another one in their pipeline who might be the best player of them all. So are they looking to trade depth for trading depth's sake, maybe trying to acquire a back-end starter or a swing type of guy? Or are they going to go for a big-time swing, knowing that Herrera can absolutely hit? The question is, can he catch? And that's where we find ourselves with a lot of this type of conversation with other catchers outside of the big, 5 or 6 names in the market, JT Realmuto being one. So if they do look to move Herrera, I think the question A would be, how many games can he catch? And B, what is the return for a player like that? The Cardinals need pitching, and they need starting pitching in a big way. The Phillies are not going to move off of Andrew Painter for a guy who may or may not be able to catch. But some of the other starters in their pipeline, they may be willing to move if they can get a guarantee that, knowing that Herrera can hit, can this guy get behind the plate? The pop time's not there. We know that. The defensive metrics were not particularly good in his last full season as a catcher. Has he been able to work on that over the last couple of years, going through this throwing program, going through another offseason of strength and conditioning and things like that? Can he become a serviceable defensive catcher enough, knowing that the bat is going to be there? I think that this is a guy who can definitely hit. The question is, can he catch at an everyday level? The third guy that we're thinking about goes to a familiar trade partner that the Phillies have gone to a couple of times this past offseason, or this past trade deadline, I should say, and it's the Minnesota Twins. The Twins have shown that they're in full rebuild mode, right? They have traded 10, they did trade 10 of their major league players at the trade deadline this past season, including 2 coming to the Phillies, in Harrison Bader and Joan Duran. Could the Phillies and Dave Dombrowski tap into another trade with the Twins, who I expect to go into that full rebuild mode and have a few major league players left that they could trade? That's where we get to the third guy, Ryan Jeffers. So let's take a look at Jeffers' numbers from a season ago. 119 games behind the plate. There's a lot of blue in that Baseball Savant page. I know it's not overly exciting. He hit 266 this past year, sub 400 slug, sub 800 OPS. The power numbers were down for Jeffers across the board. 2 years ago, he hit 21 home runs. This past year, just 9, 47 RBI, 35 extra base hits. Right about league average in terms of OPS, a little bit slightly above average in terms of weighted runs created plus at 113. So here's the good. Let's take a look at the offensive good for Jeffers. He hit 266 or better in 2 of his last 3 years. But as we said, the power number's way down. 21 home runs 2 years ago, just 9 in 2025. Now, if it makes you feel any better, if he would have hit all of his balls at Citizens Bank Park in 2025, he would have had 13 home runs. So it gets you a little bit more productivity from the power position, but it's not the 21 that we saw from 2 years ago, but maybe it makes you feel a little bit better. Unsurprisingly, the slugging was down last year, but the thing that does give me a little bit of pause on these conversations was his hard hit percentage and average exit velocities were way up from a year ago, even though his power was down, and his chase rates and whiff rates went in the right direction as well from 2024. So you kind of take the good with the bad. Now, the problem with Jeffers this past season, the defensive metrics, you saw them on that Baseball Savant page, are not good. They're all not just in the blue, but a lot of them are in the heavy blue. So again, it's a guy that you're taking the good with the bad, and that's kind of the theme of the catching position, even when you're looking to trade for some of the bigger named guys, like an Adley Rutschman, who I think we anointed as the next big thing, has really struggled offensively over the last 2 years and has struggled with injuries. You think about a guy like Ivan Herrera, who has been a dreadful defensive catcher over his career, but we know can hit. And Ryan Jeffers' numbers have been all over the place over the last couple of years. But those are 3 trade targets for the Phillies, going from a big-time name in Adley Rutschman to maybe a smaller name that could provide return if he gets back to the offensive productivity that you saw in 2024 in Ryan Jeffers. Give me a name down below. Drop it in the comments. Let me know what you think is a potential trade target for the Phillies, whether it be realistic, and you're thinking about maybe more of a platoon piece, or going for broke and trying to trade for a bigger name catcher if JT Realmuto does not sign. Now, I will say this, just like I said yesterday, I think the most likely scenario is that JT is back with the Phillies on a potential 2 or 3 year deal, higher money, lesser years, probably somewhere in the $15 to $18 million a year range. But if the future doesn't hold JT Realmuto in the cards, what is the move for the Phillies? We'll talk more about it throughout the offseason. We'll see how this thing unfolds, and we'll do it all right here on the PHLY Phillies podcast.